Chapter 2. Sunday afternoon. Inside Penny's house, Doreen looked around. It was stuffed with pretty floral patterned couches, large floral paintings, and yes, floral rugs. It was also pristine. "You haven't started packing, have you?" "It's not like I've sold my house yet," Penny said in a dry tone. As Doreen looked at Penny's big living room, it wasn't really cluttered, but it was overstuffed with mementos. "If you got a staging crew or a realtor in here," she said, "I'm pretty sure they'll insist on all the pictures coming off the walls, all the stuff being moved off the countertops, hauling out the big hutches you've got. Realtors can be quite brutal." Penny's jaw dropped. "You know what? I was thinking about bringing in a stager to see what they'd charge me. But it sounds like you know a lot about it." "Not necessarily," Doreen said, "but I've watched lots of those shows on TV. And my husband did a lot of buying and selling." "Right," Penny said. Doreen could almost see that, in Penny's mind, those disqualifiers just raised Doreen's status several notches. Doreen didn't understand how that worked because, of course, people should be doing their own investigation and research on this type of thing before deciding. Besides, in Doreen's mind, she should be demoted, not promoted, for her husband's activities. "Have you picked out a realtor?" "Absolutely. I'm going with Simi Giron," Penny said. "I've known that family for 30 years or more." "Oh good," she said, "that should make it easier. Ask her about staging and decluttering when she's here." "She's already been here once, but we haven't signed any paperwork yet." "That's when the boom will get lowered," Doreen said, chuckling. "I hope not," Penny said, walking into her kitchen, approaching a large cupboard and opening it up. She took out a small notebook sitting on top of the box of vitamin bottles, brought it to the kitchen table, and sat down, flipping through the pages. "Ah, here it is," she said, "a page just for Nan." She held it up and then read from it. "Vitamin D, ginkgo, B12, and I'm not sure what this other one says." "Do you mind if I take a look?" Doreen asked, holding out her hand. Penny handed over the notebook. As Doreen looked at it, she said, "I'm not sure what that is either. May I get a copy of this?" "We'll photocopy both sides." While Penny made copies, the animals, although curious about the inside of a new place, didn't appear bothered. Muggs wandered, Goliath dug on the rug, his tail twitching, and Thaddeus sat quietly on her shoulder, and that worried her the most. He seemed to be huddling awfully close. She reached up and murmured to him. He leaned into her touch. "Thanks," Doreen said as she accepted the sheets from Penny. Doreen gave the list a casual glance, wondering if Nan would even listen to her. Maybe if Doreen found the right time to speak with her grandmother. Still, she pocketed the list and followed Penny back to the kitchen, where Penny tucked the book back into the vitamins corner. "Must have been nice that George was so interested in health," Doreen said. "A lot of good it did him," Penny said bitterly, and she winced. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said that. I guess you're angry he died, huh?" "Isn't that the stupidest thing?" Penny said. "Even after a year, I still look around our house and I get mad at him. We had all these plans for retirement, all these things we would do now that he wasn't working anymore, and here he up and dies on me. Can't you do those things on your own?" "I could," Penny said, "but I don't really want to. They were things we would do together. They were our plans." "Versus your plans?" Penny froze for a moment and slowly nodded. "Very insightful." She glanced at her watch and said, "Oh my goodness. I have to run to meet someone." "Oh, of course." "Sorry," Doreen said. "We'll get out of your hair and let you get on then." Goliath had taken up a seat in the middle of George's big recliner. Doreen scooped him into her arms, and with Thaddeus still on her shoulder, Muggs trotted behind them. "It was a nice visit," she said, "and I'm glad I had good news for you in the end. Now your life can get back to normal." As Doreen stepped down the front steps, Penny said, "Once again, thank you. I will definitely sleep better now." With a half-wave, Doreen watched as Penny, her purse in hand, got into her vehicle, reversed out of her driveway, and headed down the street. Though Doreen knew she should leave too, she stopped on Penny's driveway. She really shouldn't do what she was thinking of doing. But it was pretty damn hard to talk herself out of it. With a shrug, she decided it would worry away at her, so she might as well put her mind to rest. She put Goliath down and headed into Penny's backyard, where Johnny had had his favorite place to sit. Doreen didn't know why Penny's echinacea bed was bugging her, but she thought she'd read somewhere how echinacea was used in all kinds of medicine. It certainly wasn't, as far as she knew, a killer, but anything could be a killer if you took too much of it. Doreen made a quick trip through Penny's backyard, mentally jotting down what was here: marigolds, lilies, calla lilies, black-eyed Susans. None were flowering yet. Daisies were with buds. This would be a lively garden when summer hit. She really appreciated the wide variety, even a few straggling tulips. She stopped and stared at them and shook her head. "Why are you guys drooping over like that?" She stopped to study the short stalks of an echinacea clump reaching for the sky. They wouldn't bloom for another month or two, and this bed was far too crowded for them to do well. Then belladonna and foxglove had mingled in the patch too. Drat. She was hoping some of these plants wouldn't be found here. So was their presence that bad? She couldn't tell. But since the same poisonous plants lived in Nan's garden, possibly Nan and George had shared a love of poisonous plants as well as antiques? Glancing around, Doreen noted how little shade the echinacea plants would probably get during the daylight hours, backed up against the fence as they were, which wouldn't help their growth. As she dropped down in front of the massive green patch, at least 3 feet across with dozens of plants in here, she frowned, realizing their roots would be completely twisted together. Echinacea plants loved company, particularly its own family, but at some point they would fight and hate each other, just like every other family unit could do. Too close confines caused too much strife. She checked the ground around the roots, unable to help herself, and realized they were also very dry. The ground was poor here, with many rocks noticeable in the soil. Even garbage. She pulled out a small piece of plastic from the edge and tossed it aside. Echinacea could survive in crappy soil. A lot of plants could survive. But the intention of a garden was not to have them survive, it was to have the flowers thrive. And again, as she glanced around the backyard, she thought what had once been Penny's pride and joy was probably just a constant source of work and bad memories now. As Doreen walked past the echinacea, she thought she saw something else burrowed in the center of one of the plants. But from the park side of the fence just then, a man asked, "Hey, what are you doing back there?" She popped out of Penny's backyard gate guiltily, leaving the gate open for her animals, and plastered a bright smile on her face. "I walked home with Penny," she said, but she had to take off. "I just wanted to get a quick look at her garden. She has done so well here," she said, injecting a bright warmth to her voice. The man looked at her suspiciously. She looked him over, from the top of his 6-foot frame to his dirty sneakers, and held out her hand. "I'm Doreen Montgomery, and who are you?" Reluctantly, he shook her hand. "I'm Steve." "Steve?" His frown deepened. "Just Steve." She nodded and said, "Well, if you see Penny and you want to tell her that I was in her backyard, that's fine," she said. "She knows I'm a crazy gardener too. I was checking out her echinacea." "Echinacea?" he asked doubtfully, looking at the green splotch against the fence. "Echinacea," she said firmly. "We were talking about mine at my house earlier." At that, his face seemed to settle, and his shoulders sagged as if with relief. "Not to worry," she said. "I'm not a thief. I'm the one who helped solve Johnny's disappearance." At that, awareness came into Steve's eyes. Of course, Muggs's slow approach, his head lowered and moving from side to side like a pissed-off bull, drew more attention to Doreen. So did the orange streak that raced between Steve's legs, and he grinned. "Now I know who you are." Thaddeus, not to be outdone, squawked, "No you don't. No you don't." Yeah, sorry about them, Doreen said. She gave Steve a quick finger wave. And now I'll head home before my critters decide they like Penny's garden better than mine. Steve watched as she and her animals ambled toward the creek. Why are you walking along the creek? He asked, calling behind her. Because I love it, she said. It's my favorite place to walk. He shrugged and said, nothing but dirty water down there. It's full of ducks and all kinds of waterfowl. Hopefully I'll see some today. You won't catch me walking through the water, that's their toilet. And with that, he headed off. She walked a few more steps and turned to look back. He strode away, not having explained his presence at Penny's property. Doreen frowned and thought about that, then sent Penny a text. Stop to take a quick look at your Echinacea plants. A stranger named Steve came up and didn't seem terribly friendly. Wasn't sure what he was doing in the park behind your place. Just a heads up. And she left it at that. Come on, Goliath, Muggs. Thaddeus squawked as he waddled toward her, but then Muggs came racing forward with Goliath on his heels, and in a surprisingly quick move, Thaddeus jumped on Muggs, screaming at the top of his lungs, "Giddy up, Muggs! Giddy up, Muggs!" Doreen just shook her head with a loving smirk on her face. My family. By the time Doreen had reached her little bridge that would lead to her backyard, Thaddeus had long given up riding Muggs, subsequently walking. But now he was tucked into the crook of her neck, swaying with her every step. She crossed the bridge as her phone beeped with a return text. He's a lovely neighbor, but he doesn't like strangers. That Echinacea is doing terribly. As are some of my more specialized plants. Suggestions? Doreen grinned. Perfect entrance to find out more. Absolutely. Maybe we'll have tea another day and check it out. Anytime.